A Werewolf Shifter Romance by Cauliflower Campbell. In the aftermath of darkness, Bree is trying to find her way back to herself. Not all at once, not perfectly, but in small, powerful moments. Through movement, through memory, through the presence of someone who refuses to let her fall apart, even when she wants to. What grows between her and Theo isn't just love, it's something deeper, something tested, something that has already survived more than most ever could. But peace doesn't come without a cost. Just as hope begins to take shape, the past resurfaces, sharper, louder, and far more dangerous than before. Secrets unravel, loyalties are tested, and a moment meant to seal their future becomes the very thing that threatens to destroy it. This isn't just a story about finding love, it's about fighting for it. Welcome back to my channel. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Chapter 18. The night had turned thick and silent by the time Theo's car cut through the forest road. The rain from earlier still lingered on the windshield, a faint mist curling around the headlights as though the world itself were holding its breath. Inside, Theo held Breanna close against his chest, his grip steady but trembling with fear that if he loosened it even a little, she might fade away again. Every bump in the road drew a wince from her body, and each one carved another scar of guilt across his face. "Theo," James said from the passenger seat, his voice low and worried. "Can you smell the wolfsbane on her?" Theo's jaw tightened. "Smell it?" His tone broke somewhere between rage and despair. "I can feel it." Breanna barely heard them. Her head rested against Theo's shoulder, her vision drifting in and out of focus. She could feel his heartbeat through his shirt, strong, steady, alive. The warmth of it was almost foreign after so long in the cold. The temptation to close her eyes, to let sleep swallow her, was heavy. But she fought it. She wouldn't let Theo watch her slip away. Not again. The car finally stopped. Cool air brushed her skin as Theo opened the door. His arms tightened around her, and she felt the tremor of his breath as he whispered something she couldn't quite make out. Around them, the sound of hurried footsteps broke through the night. When he stepped out, voices rose, gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Wolves who hadn't seen their Luna in a year now stood frozen, their faces pale in the porch light. "The Luna," someone breathed. Theo's voice thundered softly above the crowd, firm but weary. "I know it's a shock," he said, "but she needs space. Let her breathe. She needs rest." He moved past them, carrying her up the steps and into the house. Each step seemed endless, every creak of the floorboards echoing like memories she didn't want to relive. The bathroom light flickered on, washing her in pale gold. Theo set her down gently, his expression unreadable as his eyes traced the marks and bruises time had left on her. Breanna flinched when his fingers brushed her skin, and his voice softened to a whisper meant for her ears alone. "All I'm going to do is patch you up, Bree," he murmured. "Tomorrow, I'll take you to the pack doctor. Tonight, I just want you to sleep without pain." She gave a faint nod, her throat too tight to speak. Theo worked carefully, hands trembling as he reached for a clean towel. For a moment he stepped away, and Breanna's mind raced, panic curling through her chest like smoke. Was he leaving? Was he getting something to hurt her with? But then he returned, holding nothing more threatening than a hair tie. "Hold still," he said softly. Gathering her hair, he tied it up, brushing the strands back with surprising gentleness. His scent, cedar and storm air, surrounded her. One by one, he cleaned the wounds that could be cleaned, his movements quiet and deliberate. He didn't ask questions. When his gaze caught on her back, the air in the room shifted. His breath hitched, and for a second, he had to close his eyes. "What did they do to you, Bree?" His voice cracked like old wood. She only shook her head. She didn't have the words, and he didn't press her. When he was done, Theo fetched one of his hoodies from the closet and handed it to her. She slipped it over her thin frame, the fabric swallowing her whole. It smelled of him, pine, warmth, home. For the first time in a year, she felt something like safety. Theo turned toward the door, but she reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing his arm. The look she gave him said everything. Don't go. What is it, Bree? He asked quietly. No sound came out, but she tilted her head toward the bed. He understood. He always had. With a small smile, he pulled off his shirt and lay beside her, wrapping his arms around her trembling frame. I'll always be here, he whispered, his breath warm against her hair. And with those words, she drifted into her first real sleep in a year. The late morning light spilled across the room like liquid gold. Breanna stirred at the sound of voices, one soft, one sharp. Theo, baby, I haven't seen you in a week. The name hit her like a splash of cold water. She blinked, her sore eyes focusing on the woman standing in the doorway. Louise. Theo's voice was strained. Louise, I've told you before and I'll tell you again, it was a mistake. Breanna's stomach twisted. So she'd been right. The woman with perfect hair and venomous green eyes, she wasn't just anyone. Louise's gaze landed on the bed, on Breanna wrapped in Theo's hoodie. Her smirk was poisonous. Have fun explaining the fact that you screwed another woman. She turned sharply, her heels clacking against the floor as she stormed out. Theo exhaled, rubbing his face. I'm sorry, he said softly. I didn't mean for you to find out like that. Breanna didn't respond. What was there to say? She just looked away. Why aren't you yelling at me? He asked, coming closer. I deserve it. She wanted to tell him that after a year of silence, anger felt too heavy to carry, that her heart had been broken in ways words couldn't mend. But she only shrugged, eyes blank. He sighed, sitting beside her. I was stressed. I drank. I made a mistake. And I hated myself for it the moment it happened. Her eyes caught a pen and notepad on the nightstand. She picked them up, her fingers trembling slightly as she wrote, It's fine. You need someone strong to be your Luna. Theo read the words and set the paper down gently. His hand brushed her cheek, his thumb tracing the faint scar near her jaw. It would take someone strong to endure what you did, he said. To suffer like that for a year and still protect everyone. You don't see it yet, but you're stronger than you think, Bree. And I'll remind you of that every day, for the rest of my life. His eyes held hers, and something inside her broke, not from pain, but from the sudden rush of love she thought she'd lost. Slowly she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, trembling, a rediscovery of something that had almost been erased. When they pulled apart, Theo whispered, Get some rest. I'll step out so you can get ready. After he left, she took a shower. The water was warm, washing away the grime and remnants of a year's worth of darkness. In the mirror, her reflection startled her, thinner, hollow-eyed, a stranger with scars where innocence once lived. Still, beneath all that, a spark lingered. She dressed and left the bathroom, but before she could take 3 steps down the hall, a hand shoved her roughly against the wall. Louise. Her eyes glittered like shards of envy. Listen, she hissed. Just because you're back doesn't mean you get to step in and ruin what I have with Theo. Breanna didn't react. Silence had become her shield. Louise smirked at the lack of response. I will be his, even if it means going behind your back. A thunderous voice broke through the hall. Louise! Both women froze. Theo's footsteps thundered closer, heavy, purposeful, furious. My love? Louise turned with feigned innocence. I told you to leave her alone, he said, his tone low and deadly calm. But she's in the way. No, he cut her off. You're in the way. This is the 3rd time you've disrespected your Luna. You're done, Louise. Pack your things. You're leaving this pack tonight. Louise's face was drained of color. Theo, please. Enough, he snapped, wrapping his arms around Breanna protectively. His presence radiated strength, a storm barely held at bay. Brianna's hand trembled as she reached into her pocket, pulling out the notepad again. She scribbled quickly, then passed it to him. "You didn't need to do that." He glanced at the note, a faint smile touching his lips. His anger softened. "Even after everything, you're still the same caring person I saw dancing in the woods that day," he murmured. Her eyes lifted to his, and she wrote one more word, the word that had anchored her through the pain, through silence, through loss. Always. Theo brushed his fingers along her jaw, the corners of his mouth lifting in a quiet promise. "Then always it is." The world outside the window glowed with the pale gold of morning. The war was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, peace had a face, and it was hers. Chapter 19. The sterile smell of antiseptic clung to the air, sharp, cold, inescapable. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly, casting pale reflections on the polished hospital floors. The world outside the window was blurred by the gray drizzle that had followed them from the car, streaking across the glass like silent tears. Breanna sat on the edge of the examination bed, her hands folded loosely in her lap. Her eyes wandered from the muted television on the wall to the curtain that swayed slightly with every draft that entered the room. Every movement in the hallway made her tense. Every whisper, every glance, every shift of the curtain felt like a reminder that she wasn't invisible anymore. They all stared. Some because they recognized her, Luna Breanna, the Alpha's mate who had vanished for a year, who had been whispered about in hushed tones and mourned by half the pack. Others stared for different reasons, the scars, the bruises, the fragile curve of her collarbone that hadn't been there before. It wasn't like she could hide them. Theo stood by the window, arms folded, trying to look composed, but failing. His jaw flexed every few seconds, the muscle tightening as though to hold back everything he wanted to say. He had waited for this, for answers, for confirmation that she would recover. But watching her sit there, silent and still, tore at something inside him. They were waiting for the blood results to come back. The seconds stretched, long and uneven. Theo kept glancing toward the door, and each time, Breanna caught his reflection in the glass. His eyes softened when he looked at her, but his face hardened again when he looked away, like he couldn't decide whether to comfort her or destroy everything that had hurt her. The door opened. The doctor stepped in, a clipboard tucked under one arm, a small stack of papers in the other. Her expression was professional, but even she faltered for a second when her gaze landed on Breanna. "The wolfsbane is almost out of her system," she said, scanning the results, "which is good. But," her eyes flicked briefly toward Theo, "it's the weight loss I'd be more worried about. It's clear she wasn't fed much. That, combined with the physical strain and," she hesitated, "the trauma, contributed to her condition. She's well hydrated, though." Theo's hand tightened around the edge of the chair. Breanna looked down at her lap, her lips twitching faintly. Hydrated. Of course she was. They made sure of that. A hydrated wolf couldn't run, not when the water was laced with wolfsbane. The doctor turned another page. "Why isn't she talking?" Breanna's head lifted slowly at that. The question hung in the air like a blade, everyone waiting for her to respond, but her lips stayed pressed together. The doctor's gaze softened. She looked at Theo, then back at Breanna, and her voice lowered. "She isn't ready to yet," she said. "Give her time to adjust. She's been through something unimaginable. Forcing her to speak now might do more harm than good. She will talk when she's ready." Theo nodded faintly, his jaw still tight. "In the meantime," the doctor continued, "don't push her to eat too much right away. Start small, gradually. Her system needs to relearn what normal feels like." She scribbled something on the clipboard, the pen scratching softly against paper. "That should help her regain strength." Theo's eyes flicked toward Breanna again. She wasn't looking at him, but she didn't need to. He understood the silence that surrounded her. It was her only defense left. He cleared his throat quietly. "What about dancing?" The doctor looked up, her brows arching slightly. Dancing? Theo nodded. How long until she can do that again? For the first time in what felt like forever, something faintly human stirred across Breanna's face. The smallest hint of a smile, trembling at the corner of her lips. Of all the things he could have asked about, that was the one he chose. The doctor smiled too, softer this time. I don't see why she can't dance right away, she said. Once she feels comfortable, she should be fine. Just take it slow. If you have trouble sleeping, come back. I can prescribe something mild. Breanna gave a slow nod, her eyes fixed on the floor as the doctor handed Theo the papers. You can take her home now, Alpha. Theo thanked her, but Breanna noticed the smile the doctor gave him. Polite, maybe a little too warm. It brushed a spark of something sharp beneath her ribs. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe it was just the ache of distance, the echo of a year spent alone. It was no problem, the doctor said, shaking Theo's hand. Breanna's eyes flicked to their hands for only a second before she looked away. Theo helped her down from the bed. His hand was rough, warm, the same warmth she had dreamed of for months. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of pine and rain. The pack house wasn't far, but each step toward it felt longer than the one before. When they got back, the familiar creak of the front door filled the air. It smelled of cedar and smoke, the same scent that always lingered on Theo's shirts. Breanna hesitated in the doorway, her eyes tracing the photographs along the wall. Pack gatherings, smiling faces, a time before everything had gone wrong. Theo disappeared briefly into the kitchen. When he returned, he held a plate in his hands, a sandwich. Bree, he said gently, setting it in front of her. Just eat half. She stared at it. Bread, meat, a little cheese, harmless. Yet the thought of swallowing it made her stomach twist. After a year of irregular meals and forced hunger, even the scent of food felt foreign. The first bite was the hardest. Her gag reflex rebelled. The bread was dry, painfully so. She forced herself to chew, the texture rough against her tongue. Half a sandwich shouldn't have felt like a mountain, but it did. Theo sat beside her, not pushing, not speaking, just waiting. His quiet patience was louder than any words could have been. It took half an hour to finish the half sandwich. When she was done, she leaned back, eyes unfocused, fighting the urge to throw it all back up. Theo didn't say a word. He simply reached out and brushed his thumb across her knuckles, grounding her. When she finally stood, it took her longer than usual to make her way to his room. Her limbs felt heavy, her heartbeat faintly unsteady. But there was something she needed, something she hadn't touched in over a year. She searched the closet until she found it. The pink satin caught the afternoon light like a memory reborn. Her point shoes. They were still bright, untouched by dust. She traced her fingers over the smooth surface, remembering the day her father had given them to her, a week before she met Theo. They'll last longer than your last pair, he had said, smiling proudly. She sat on the edge of the bed and slipped on the gel pads, then laced the shoes around her ankles. The ribbons crossed neatly, familiar motions that her body hadn't forgotten. Her hands trembled slightly, but her heart steadied with each pull of the fabric. Even after wearing them only 6 hours before everything had changed, they were still stiff, unbroken, like her. The door creaked. Theo stepped in, his eyes falling on her instantly. The soft pink against her pale skin, the way her posture straightened as if trying to remember who she once was. He crossed the room quietly, the light glancing off his shoulders as he knelt in front of her. When his thumb brushed a tear from her cheek, she hadn't even realized she was crying. They killed him. The words came out faint, brittle, but they were words. Theo's breath caught. Who did they kill? Her eyes, glossy with tears, met his. My father, she whispered. He's dead because of me. Theo shook his head, his hands finding hers. His palms dwarfed hers completely. No, Bree, he said firmly. His death wasn't caused by you. He died protecting you. and your future. Her shoulders trembled. They cut his head off in front of me, Theo. And that wasn't even the worst pain I felt. His grip tightened. You don't need to talk about it right now, he said softly. Not tonight. The air between them grew heavy, charged with something neither of them could name. Slowly, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met. It wasn't a kiss of passion or desperation. It was the slow, uncertain rediscovery of something lost. His warmth pressed against her coldness, steady and patient. The ache in her chest unfurled like the first breath of spring. Theo drew back first, his thumb still brushing the edge of her jaw. I love you, he whispered, smiling that half-smile she had missed so deeply. Her voice, raw but clear, broke the quiet. And I love you, Bree, he said. I've loved you and your wolf for 1,000 years, and I'll love you for 1,000 more. The room fell into stillness. The soft hum of the rain outside, the faint scent of pine, the muted creak of the old floorboards beneath their feet, all of it folded into the moment like the world itself was holding its breath for them. Theo pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her shoulders, the top of her head resting against his chest. Breanna closed her eyes. The ache didn't vanish, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't consume her. There was space now, space for healing, for hope, for the ghost of a dance that hadn't yet ended. Outside, the wind carried the faintest sound of rustling leaves, almost like applause for the broken girl who had finally found her way home. Chapter 20. It had been a week before she started dancing again. 7 long days of silence, of restless nights spent staring at the ceiling of that quiet room she'd found, a place no one ever entered, a sanctuary wrapped in dust and shadows. It was as if the world had forgotten it existed, and that suited her perfectly. Maybe Theo had told them not to disturb her. Maybe they simply knew better than to interfere. Either way, it was just her and the music now. The room wasn't much. Old wooden floors scuffed by time, mirrors clouded at the edges, and tall windows that caught every drop of light when the sun bled into the sky. She'd drawn the curtains the first day and never opened them again. The air inside smelled faintly of cedar and something older, memories that weren't hers. Here, she wasn't the quiet girl everyone whispered about. She wasn't the survivor of a year locked away or the girl with trembling hands. She was movement. She was rhythm. She was every note that pulsed through the air. At first, it was all about control, techniques, precision, muscle and memory. For 3 relentless hours, she practiced turns until the floorboards creaked beneath her, leaps until her breath came ragged, jumps until her reflection blurred. Her limbs ached, but she didn't stop. The music wasn't background noise anymore. It was her pulse, her heartbeat. And when she got bored, she pushed herself harder. She started counting fouettes, twirling endlessly, her body moving faster with every rotation until she wasn't sure where the song ended and she began. 2 full songs passed, and still she spun. The bruises were gone now, the last traces of that dark year. The pain that used to hold her hostage was gone too. What remained was freedom, raw and fierce. Each turn became a rebellion against everything that had caged her. Each leap whispered, I'm still here. When the music stopped, she didn't notice. The world had dissolved into a haze of breath and motion. It was only when the faint creak of the door broke through that she slowed, turning on unsteady feet. Theo stood there, leaning against the doorframe, his gaze fixed on her. He said nothing at first, just watched. The faintest curve of a smile tugged at his mouth, the kind that could disarm anyone. I remember the first day I saw you, he said finally, his voice low, carrying that effortless steadiness that always seemed to fill the room. You were dancing in the woods. Her eyes flicked to him, curiosity sparking in their depths. He laughed softly. It seemed like you didn't even care that the ground was uneven, that one wrong step could hurt you. He stepped closer, each stride measured. And you enchanted me right from the start. She froze when his hand came up, the rough warmth of his palm brushing against her cheek. It wasn't the first time he'd touched her, but it felt different now. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, something new, something alive. Admiration. A slow song began to play from her playlist. She hadn't realized it had shifted. The melody filled the quiet room like a heartbeat. Theo's fingers slipped to her waist, his other hand gently taking hers. Without a word, she placed her free hand on his shoulder. Then, he led. At first, it was tentative, cautious, like a secret neither of them wanted to break. But soon, he moved with surprising grace. Among the many things she didn't know about Theo, one stood out sharply now. He could dance. Not perfectly, but beautifully enough to make it look like he had been born to move in rhythm with her. He spun her out, then back in, their steps echoing through the empty space. The soft hum of the song filled every pause between breaths. He guided her effortlessly, each movement fluid, grounded, confident. He even managed one of the more difficult lifts, his arms sliding beneath hers as he spun her so that her feet just grazed the floor, her body light as air. She gasped, not out of fear, but exhilaration. When he brought her back down, her back pressed against his chest. His breath fanned across her neck as he turned them both in one slow, deliberate circle. Then, without missing a beat, he swung her around, catching her waist again as she went on point, her leg rising gracefully, perfectly balanced. He steadied her with a hand at her lower back, and she trusted him completely. The next move happened before she could think. Theo shifted his stance, his strength gathering beneath her, and suddenly she was weightless, rolling across his back in one fluid motion. Her hair brushed his shoulder as she came down again, the floor barely kissing her toes before he lifted her once more. The room blurred around them. Time didn't exist, only movement, only them. When he finally set her down, it wasn't a clean stop. Their bodies continued to move, swaying, drawn together by something stronger than choreography. Theo's hands never left her, tracing her rhythm, learning her without asking. It was nothing like the dances she'd shared with Adam. Those had been light, fun, filled with teasing and laughter. This was something else entirely. This was intimate. Every touch, every step was deliberate. His closeness wasn't accidental, it was magnetic. He left barely an inch of space between them, his eyes locked on hers the entire time. When she spun, he caught her hand. When she leapt, he steadied her. When she breathed, he was already in sync. It made no sense, how well he knew her body's rhythm, how instinctively he moved to match her flow. Adam had taken a year to learn how to lift her properly, to understand her balance points, to read her pauses. Theo knew all of it instinctively, and they had only known each other for a month. The song swelled, nearing its end. Theo's grip tightened slightly as he lifted her again, this time higher. His hands were steady beneath her ribs, his strength unwavering as she arched her back, arms extended like wings. For one long moment, she hovered there above him, suspended in the final notes of the song, every breath between them heavy with something unspoken. Then the music faded. Theo lowered her gently, turning her so that she faced him. Silence fell. The world outside the room was gone. There wasn't a trace of sweat on him, not a drop. Yet his eyes burned with something molten, intense, and alive. Brown irises deepened to near black, and she felt that look sink into her skin. It was a gaze that didn't just see her, it claimed her. A look that filled her with desire. It wasn't hunger, not exactly. It was something older, something primal, a calling from deep within her bones. It was as if her heart had been waiting for this moment all along. He stepped closer until there was no space left between them. The air trembled. Her chest rose against his with every breath, and she could hear his heartbeat, strong, steady, echoing in perfect time with hers. Her hand trembled slightly as it rested against his chest. She could feel the warmth of him beneath the fabric of his shirt. Her lips parted, but no words came out. None were needed. Theo's thumb brushed her jaw, a touch so gentle it was almost reverent. His voice was a whisper when it came, low, rough, sincere. "You don't have to hide anymore." She didn't answer. Her body did. Her head tilted slightly, leaning into his touch. Her eyes flicked up to meet his again, and in them was that same realization that hit her all at once. She was ready. Ready for him. Ready for everything that came with being his. That feeling, that burning thread between them, was what it took for her to know, truly know, that she wanted to be claimed. By him. By Theo. Her mate. The music player clicked softly as the playlist looped back to the first song again, but neither of them moved. Outside, the sun had dipped below the horizon, staining the windows in streaks of violet and gold. Dust motes drifted through the air, catching what little light was left. The world had gone still, caught in the aftermath of something sacred. And in that silence, in that dim, echoing room, two souls stood on the edge of something far greater than either had expected. The dance was over, but the claiming had only just begun. Chapter 21. The air between them crackled, charged, alive, and impossibly fragile. Theo's breath mingled with Bree's, his lips just a whisper away. For a suspended heartbeat, neither of them moved. The only sound was the quiet thrum of their pulses syncing together, two rhythms finding one steady beat. And then she closed the distance. Bree's lips met his in a fierce, trembling rush. Not gentle, not uncertain, but full of everything she had been holding back for a year. Every sleepless night, every wound that hadn't yet healed, every ache she'd buried deep inside came pouring out through that kiss. Theo's arms wrapped around her instantly, pulling her closer until the world beyond them vanished. Her fingers clung to him, desperate and hungry, as though she could anchor herself to this moment and never let go. Theo deepened the kiss with a kind of restrained passion, his warmth pressing against her like fire and comfort all at once. But when he drew back slightly, his voice was a soft tremor against her skin. "Bree," he murmured, breathless but grounded. "We should stop before we lose control." Her eyes lifted to his, wide and wet and unguarded. "I don't want to stop," her voice cracked, trembling with raw honesty. "When we met, you said you'd wait until I was ready. I was scared before, Theo. I'm not anymore. I'm ready now. Ready for everything. For you." Theo's eyes softened. The golden flecks in his brown irises glimmered with something ancient and tender. He studied her face as though trying to memorize every line, every scar, every heartbeat beneath her skin. "I don't want you to move fast just for me," he whispered. "I'm not," she said, pressing her forehead against his. "I'm doing this for us." The words barely left her lips before he kissed her again. Slow this time, reverent, as if he were afraid she might vanish if he wasn't careful. His touch wasn't possessive, it was worshipful. Theo's hands moved up her back, tracing the faint scars that told stories of survival rather than pain. Each touch felt like a promise, that he saw her, every piece of her, and still loved her more than life itself. When he lifted her, Bree felt her heart race, not from fear, but from belonging. The world blurred as Theo carried her effortlessly, his laughter low and warm when she let out a surprised sound that turned into a giggle. "People are staring," she whispered. "They'll live," he said simply, his voice threaded with amusement. "Let them see what love looks like." By the time the door closed behind them, the noise of the world faded into silence. The room seemed bathed in golden light, soft and endless. Theo looked at her as though she were the only thing that existed. And maybe, for him, she was. Bree reached up and traced her fingers down his jawline, marveling at the man who had seen her at her weakest and never turned away. He was strength and warmth and loyalty wrapped into one heartbeat. "Theo," she whispered, "you make me feel alive again." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You never stopped being alive, Bree. You just needed someone to remind you." Her tears fell freely now, glinting like tiny shards of moonlight. "They killed him," she breathed. "My father. He's gone because of me." Theo's expression shifted, the faintest shadow crossing his face before tenderness returned. He sank to his knees in front of her, taking her trembling hands into his. "No," he said firmly, eyes locked on hers. "He died protecting you, not because of you. His last act was one of love, and that love is still here, right inside you." She shook her head, the memories still too sharp. "They cut off his head, Theo. I saw it." Her voice cracked. "I thought that would be the worst pain I'd ever feel, but it wasn't. It was surviving without him." He pulled her close then, holding her as if his very soul could mend her broken pieces. "You don't have to talk about it right now," he murmured against her hair. "You've already lived through enough. Let me carry the pain with you, Bree. You don't have to bear it alone anymore." The warmth of his chest against her cheek, the steady beat of his heart, the scent of pine and smoke, it was enough to steady her breath. Bree tilted her head up, and before she could stop herself, she kissed him again. It wasn't desperation this time. It was surrender. Their lips met in a dance that spoke more than words could ever say, a rhythm of forgiveness, trust, and rediscovered life. When they broke apart, Theo rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, voice husky and certain. "I've loved you in every life before this one, and I'll love you in every life after." Bree's smile trembled, fragile but real. "And I love you, Theo. My wolf and I, we've loved you for 1,000 years." He smiled, and in that moment, something deep and eternal passed between them. A quiet pulse of energy that hummed beneath their skin. Theo's hand came up to the side of her neck, his thumb brushing softly over her pulse point. The mark, that sacred, ancient bond, would mean unity, protection, eternity. And Bree didn't flinch when he leaned closer, when his breath warmed that spot on her throat. "Mark me," she whispered. Theo's eyes flickered, gold burning through brown. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He pressed his lips to her neck, and Bree gasped at the sensation. It wasn't pain that followed. It was warmth. A rush of light spreading through her veins like wildfire. The connection flared to life, bright and endless. For the first time she felt it, the heartbeat of his wolf inside her own. The mark glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with their shared breaths. Bree felt stronger, lighter, whole. She met Theo's gaze through a haze of tears. "What just happened?" she whispered. Theo smiled, his thumb brushing away her tears. "You're mine," he said softly, "and I'm yours. It's not ownership, Bree, it's unity. 2 wolves, 1 heartbeat." They lay there, cocooned beneath the soft glow of moonlight filtering through the window. For the first time in forever, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, filled with the quiet hum of contentment. Theo brushed his fingers over her cheek, his touch feather light. "You're safe now," he murmured, "and you'll always be safe." Bree let her eyes close, the weight of exhaustion finally lifting from her chest. "Some heroes wear masks," she whispered faintly, her voice soft as sleep began to claim her. "Others grow fur and walk on 4 legs." Theo smiled, pulling her closer until her head rested against his shoulder. "And some heroes," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "are both." Chapter 22. It had been a week before she found herself moving again, truly moving. The days before that were still, like the frozen surface of a lake, hiding the turbulence underneath. The silence of the mansion was both comforting and suffocating. People passed her by in hushed tones, uncertain whether to speak or not. But when she discovered the old mirrored room tucked away behind the eastern corridor, something inside her stirred. No one ever came here. The air was thick with dust and faint echoes of forgotten music, yet the sunlight that filtered through the high-arched windows turned the room into something sacred. She began to return every day, slipping in like a ghost. No one followed her. Perhaps Theo had told them not to, or maybe they simply knew she needed to be alone. And in that solitude, she began to dance. At first, her movements were sharp, mechanical, a body remembering what the soul had forgotten. She focused on the basics: turns, leaps, jumps. Her feet struck the worn floorboards until the ache in her muscles burned away the weight of her stillness. She lost track of time, lost herself in repetition. 3 hours passed, then 4. Her breathing evened out, sweat glimmering faintly on her temples. For months she had felt trapped inside her own skin, every breath heavy with the residue of confinement. But here, alone with her music, she began to feel something close to freedom. The bruises were gone now. The pain had faded, leaving only memory. And for the first time in a long while, she felt whole again. When the second song ended, she switched the track, something slower, softer, hauntingly beautiful. She began another set of fouettes, counting each rotation until her mind emptied. 2 full songs later, she stopped abruptly, panting, dizzy with release. That was when she saw him. Theo stood at the door, leaning lightly against the frame. The light from the hallway framed him like a silhouette. For a moment she froze, unsure how long he had been there. His expression was unreadable, part amusement, part quiet awe. "I remember the first day I saw you," he said at last, voice low, almost reverent. "You were dancing in the woods, barefoot, spinning around the moss and roots like the world wasn't dangerous at all." He let out a soft laugh, one that carried memory rather than mirth. "You didn't even care that one wrong step could have hurt you." Slowly, he crossed the room until he stood before her. The scent of rain and pine clung to him, grounding her. When his hand rose to cup her face, she didn't move away. The warmth of his palm against her skin felt steady, protective. "And you enchanted me right from the start," he whispered. She looked up at him then, and for the first time, truly the first time, she saw it. Admiration. Not pity, not curiosity, something deep and unwavering. His brown eyes held her as if afraid she might vanish if he blinked. The playlist shifted again, and a new melody began. Low strings, slow percussion, a rhythm that filled the air with something electric. Theo's hand moved to her waist, and he extended the other toward her. Wordlessly, she placed her free hand on his shoulder. Then he began to lead. She had never seen him dance before, but Theo surprised her. His rhythm was instinctive, his movement fluid, almost predatory. He spun her out effortlessly, then drew her back in with a pull that made her heart stumble in her chest. Every motion was seamless, every step a conversation between their bodies. He lifted her lightly under her arms and spun her around so that her feet barely grazed the floor. She let herself go, the sensation of air, of motion, of being seen, all of it merging into something that made her breath catch. When her back pressed against his chest, she could feel his heartbeat, strong, steady, and impossibly close. He turned them both, and her world became motion and music. Her leg rose high, almost above 90 degrees, Theo's hand firm on her waist, supporting her as if she weighed nothing. Then, with a motion that made her laugh breathlessly, he guided her across his back, rolling her with perfect ease before setting her down again. Their feet barely touched the ground before he lifted her once more. This time she arched backward, arms outstretched, hair brushing the air like gold. When he lowered her, she landed softly, his hand never once leaving hers. Theo spun her again, and the room blurred. Mirrors reflected their movements endlessly, 2 figures intertwined in rhythm and shadow, moving as though they'd been dancing together forever. There was something intimate about it, more intimate than anything she had ever shared with Adam. Adam's dances had been light, full of laughter and teasing, but this was different. Theo danced like every motion was a confession, like every step was an unspoken vow. His hands knew her, where to hold, how to guide. His breath ghosted near her ear, steady but charged with meaning. Every turn drew her closer until there was barely space between them at all. She didn't know how he knew. They had never practiced together, never even discussed it. Yet Theo anticipated her every movement. When she reached for his hand, it was already there. When she pivoted, he was already turning her. He knew her rhythm, her instinct, her silent language. He knew her, and they had only shared a month together. As the music swelled toward its end, Theo lifted her one last time, arms steady, eyes locked on hers. The light from the window poured across them, turning dust into gold. Her heartbeat raced in her throat as she looked down at him, the world falling away until only they remained. When the final note faded, he set her down gently. Neither of them moved. The silence that followed was thick, but it wasn't empty. His gaze held her there, unwavering, deep and burning. Not possessive, but knowing. The kind of look that stripped away fear, that made her remember who she was before everything broke. There wasn't a trace of sweat on him. He simply stood there, chest rising and falling, his expression soft but fierce. And in that gaze, she felt something ignite, a warmth that started low and spread through her like light filling an abandoned house. Desire, recognition, home. She'd spent so long running from touch, from connection, from the echo of what had been taken from her. But in that moment, standing before him, she knew she wasn't afraid anymore. That feeling, that pull, was what it took for her to finally understand. She was ready to stop surviving and start living, ready to let herself belong, ready for Theo and everything he meant. She looked up at him, breath trembling, the softest smile ghosting her lips. And in that unspoken instant, she knew. She was ready for him to claim her as his. Chapter 23. Bree. The voice echoed in the darkness, soft at first, then sharper, pulling her from the stillness of sleep. Bree. It came again, closer this time, resonant and haunting. Then a light began to burn, blinding, white, endless. From that brilliance, a figure stepped out. Eric. He emerged like a phantom sculpted from firelight, his shadow bending and stretching around him. The whip in his hand gleamed under the radiance, curling like a living serpent. Bree, he said again. His voice was strange, rough and commanding, but laced with something unnervingly sweet beneath the menace, like two voices clashing inside one throat. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The ground trembled beneath her, trembling harder with every syllable. Books toppled from invisible shelves, glass shattered. The tremor grew into a quake that made the air itself shiver. Eric didn't flinch. He stepped forward through the chaos, his boots silent on the cracking floor, his hand rising toward her shoulder. When his fingers touched her, the sensation wasn't right. Too soft, too warm, too familiar. She looked up, and the world shifted. Eric's face melted away, reshaping itself into someone else's, into Theo's. His eyes, that deep brown warmth she knew too well, looked down at her as he whispered, "Bree." And just like that, she woke. Her breath tore out of her chest. The room around her was dark, dimly lit by moonlight pouring through half-drawn curtains. Her body trembled as her eyes darted around, still caught between dream and reality. Beside her, Theo stirred, instantly awake. His arm was already around her before she could speak. "Shh," he murmured, voice thick with sleep and concern. "You're safe. You're home." The nightmare's grip loosened, but her heart refused to slow. It had been a month since she came home, a month since the night in the bathroom, since Theo had found her at her weakest and refused to let go. Ever since that night, he had insisted she sleep with her arms wrapped around him. It was his way of guarding her, making sure that nothing, not even her mind, could drag her back into that darkness again. but still the nightmares came. Most nights she woke up shaking, crying silently into his chest, and every time Theo was there, never startled, never frustrated. He held her, whispered soft words she barely remembered by morning, and stayed awake until she drifted back to sleep. Once she'd asked him how he always knew, how he woke at the exact moment the nightmare began. He'd only smiled and said, "It doesn't matter." Tonight, as the silence returned, he brushed his thumb along her jaw. "You all right?" He asked her that all the time, too often, and like most nights, she didn't know how to answer. Sometimes she said yes, sometimes she lied. Tonight she didn't even have the strength to try. "I don't know," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, trembling. "It's like, I know it's just a dream, but the fear, the pain, it's still real. I remember every lash, every burn. They don't fade, Theo. They just hide." Theo's expression softened. He pulled her into his chest, resting his chin gently atop her head. "All I want," she breathed, closing her eyes, "is freedom. Freedom from that year." Theo pressed a kiss to the crown of her head. "Then let's chase it." Her eyes lifted toward him. "How?" "Let's go for a run," he said quietly. "It always helps clear your head. And maybe if you shift again, Evie will come back." She hesitated, then nodded. He was right. Running always brought a strange calm. When her body ran, her mind quieted. And maybe, just maybe, she'd feel whole again. They slipped out into the cold night, the forest behind the house heavy with mist. The moon hung like a pale sentinel above, casting silver through the branches. They left their clothes neatly folded behind a tree. She couldn't risk them tearing when the change came. Theo's form shifted first. It happened effortlessly, the ripple of muscle, the stretch of bone, the subtle, shattering sound of nature reshaping him. His features elongated, fingers curling into claws, a deep brown coat of fur covering him like the night's own shadow. His eyes, though, those stayed the same warm brown she loved. He was magnificent, powerful, steady. He looked back at her and huffed softly, urging her on. Bree exhaled and tried. Once, twice, 10 times. The shift resisted her like an old wound that refused to heal. Her body trembled with strain. The wolfsbane had dulled her nature for so long that even remembering the feeling of transformation felt impossible. But Theo waited patiently, no frustration, no judgment, just quiet presence. On the 15th try, it happened. The pain gave way to light, bones sliding into place, fur blossoming across her skin. Her vision sharpened, colors deepened, scents came alive. Earth, pine, the distant pulse of water. She felt the heartbeat of the world again. And then, a voice. "Oh hey, you're actually alive." Evie. For once, Bree didn't roll her eyes at her wolf's sarcastic tone. "Nice to hear from you too, Evie." The voice chuckled in the back of her mind. It was strange, comforting, like reuniting with a part of herself that had been buried. The wolf had always been her anchor, her fire, and she'd missed her more than she realized. Theo nudged her gently with his snout and motioned toward the open clearing. Then, without warning, he took off. Bree followed. They ran through the forest, paws thudding softly against damp earth. The cold air cut through her fur, invigorating her. Wind streamed past her ears, and the rhythm of her heartbeat matched the pounding of her steps. The faster they ran, the lighter she felt. The chains of her nightmares loosened, one by one, until she felt weightless. Every so often, Theo would glance sideways, his golden brown eyes glinting with joy. Sometimes he'd loop around her, teasing, brushing her flank, daring her to chase him. She growled playfully, snapping at his tail. It became a game, a dance between shadows and moonlight. They wove around trees, leapt across fallen logs, moved in sync as though they had done this their entire lives. It reminded her of that scene from The Lion King, Nala and Simba twining through the grass under starlight, that wordless current of affection running between them. They ran until the forest opened up, until the sound of rushing water filled the air. The waterfall, even at 3 a.m, it was breathtaking. Mist rose like silver smoke from where the water struck the rocks. The pool below shimmered in hues of deep green and blue, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Bree slowed, then shifted back. Her human form knelt by the water's edge, bare feet sinking into the soft earth. She exhaled, her breath curling like fog. Theo shifted beside her, his larger frame moving closer until his arms wrapped around her from behind. His warmth enveloped her instantly. She leaned back against him, letting his breath trail against her shoulder. "Mom showed me this place before she died," she whispered. "Every new moon, I used to come here to shift. It made me feel close to her." Theo's voice was soft. "She would be proud of you. Your father, too." Bree smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the waterfall's glow. Theo's hand reached up, brushing through her hair. His fingers found the single streak of red that shimmered like fire even in the moonlight. "This isn't dyed?" "No," she said quietly. 3 centuries ago, one of my mom's ancestors, her mate was a hunter. It was forbidden, but they couldn't help it. She left her pack to be with him. Every woman in the line since then has had that same red streak. It's kind of a mark." "A mark of what?" Theo asked gently. "Of being different," she said. "Of not being fully wolf. For years, I thought it was a curse. The hunters didn't even recognize it. They just wanted information from me." Theo sighed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "No more talk of that darkness. Nothing can harm you now, not while I'm here. Let me be your freedom, Bree. Let me be the daylight that dries your tears when you cry. I will guard you and guide you. I will love you every waking moment. I promise you, every word is true. I'll be your shelter, your light. Those people, they'll never find you again. That fear is behind you now." His words sank into her like warmth after a storm. The heat that bloomed in her chest wasn't from desire, it was from love, real, raw love. "I want you to always be beside me, Theo," she whispered. "I want you to hold me when I have those dreams. I need you to hide me from those memories." Theo's face lit up, his eyes shining brighter than the moon above. "We already share one love for our one lifetime, Bree. The moon goddess saw to that. But it only means so much. The rest is your choice. Say the word, and I'll follow you, wherever you go. That's all I ask of you, Breanna Mason." Then, somehow, she hadn't even noticed him carrying it. He reached into his discarded shirt and pulled out a small black box. He opened it silently and placed it in her trembling hands. Inside was a ring. The band gleamed with the faintest blue reflection from the water. Stainless steel, simple, pure. A diamond rested at its heart, small, elegant, and impossibly perfect. Her breath caught. "Are you asking me what I think you are?" Theo stepped closer, close enough for his breath to brush her lips. Then he kissed her softly, just once. "Yes, I am, Bree. I want you to be my wife, as well as my mate." Tears blurred her vision. The ring slid onto her finger as though it had been waiting for her all along. "Yes," she whispered, smiling through the tears. "Yes." Theo laughed, that deep, rich sound that made the whole forest seem to glow warmer. He swept her off her feet, spinning her around as she laughed breathlessly in his arms. When he set her down again, the smile never left her face. "You do know," she teased, "that you basically stole your proposal speech from All I Ask of You in The Phantom of the Opera, right?" His laughter rolled through the night like thunder, soft and full of joy. I know, he said, grinning. While you were gone, I asked your brother what your favorite movie was. He told me. So I watched it. Twice a week. She blinked at him, stunned and touched beyond words. He chuckled again. Now I see why you love it so much. And just like that, they were engaged. They didn't run back that night. They walked, hand in hand beneath the canopy of whispering leaves, the forest alive with crickets and moonlight. The air smelled of wet earth and beginnings. The world felt different, lighter. Bree tilted her head against Theo's shoulder as they made their slow way home. For the first time since the nightmares began, she wasn't afraid of the dark. Because she knew, this time, the dark couldn't touch her. Not while he was beside her. Chapter 24. The air whipped around Bree as she walked through the forest, leaves crunching under her feet, and the chill of autumn nipping at her skin. Her knees sank slightly into the damp earth as she approached the simple gray stone that marked her father's grave. For weeks she had avoided this place, telling herself she wasn't ready, but now something inside her demanded she see it for herself. She needed to confront the hollow ache of his absence. Her fingers brushed the cool stone. The name etched on it drilled into her chest, twisting into guilt that made it hard to breathe. How could his death feel so heavy when she had survived? How could she still be alive when he wasn't? She knelt there, letting the wind carry the memory of him, the memory of loss, and the weight of the year she had endured. "So, I'm getting married, Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anticipation. "Theo asked me, and I said yes." The words felt heavy, yet liberating. "I hear James is doing well as beta. I probably wouldn't have been able to do that." She swallowed hard, imagining what her father would say. And then, as if answering from somewhere beyond, a familiar voice made her jump. "And yet you are going to be a Luna," James said softly, stepping into the clearing. His presence made her pulse quicken, a strange comfort in the shadow of grief. Relief flooded her as she ran into his arms, holding him tightly. She hadn't seen him since the night Theo had saved her. Their paths had never crossed since then. "James," she whispered against his chest, letting herself breathe again. "Have you kicked your mate's butt yet?" he asked with a teasing grin. A laugh escaped her despite the heaviness in her chest. "No, I have no reason to. He's my mate, so I forgive him." She had told herself that over and over, trying to believe it. "I know that isn't true, Bree. Just because you were tortured for a year doesn't mean you're better at lying than you think," James replied gently, his eyes searching hers. "It isn't lying if it's true," she countered softly. But as the words left her lips, she realized the truth behind James's concern. Maybe she was forgiving Theo out of need, the deep, aching longing for the touch and safety she had craved during that terrible year. Rage and hurt coiled in her chest. His mate had suffered unimaginable pain, yet he had been with someone else. How could that feel right? James noticed the shift in her expression. "If it makes you feel better," he said with a small smirk. "I punched him when I found out." Bree couldn't help but laugh, the tension in her shoulders loosening for a moment. The memory of her brother's righteous indignation at Theo's mistakes made her smile. Then, quieter, she asked, "Who's giving me away at my wedding?" James's expression softened, a flicker of pride crossing his features. "You're not walking down the aisle alone. As your only living male relative, it's my job to do that." Gratitude swelled in her chest. "Thank you," she said, meaning every word. He tilted his head, that familiar playful grin appearing. "I do have one condition, though." Her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "You need to teach me to dance," he said, his grin widening, "so I can also take part in the father-daughter dance." Bree laughed, shaking her head. "You've got a deal, but if we're going to do this, we need to start now. No offense, brother, but you really do suck at dancing." For the first time, James didn't argue. He just laughed, a warm, easy sound that reminded her why family mattered so much. "You've got a point. Let's get out of here." They returned to the pickup truck, climbing in side by side. The drive back was quiet at first, filled with the soft hum of the engine. Then James spoke, asking about his own life, about love, about the time that had passed while she had been gone. She listened, the guilt of missing his graduation and his milestones pressing on her, but also relief that life had continued around her pain. By the time they reached Theo's pack house, the first hints of evening were settling into the sky, painting it with bruised purples and golds. As they stepped inside, Bree's eyes immediately landed on a familiar smirk she hadn't expected to see again. Louise. The same girl who had made her year of suffering more complicated than it already was. Before Bree could speak, Louise stepped forward, an almost casual confidence in her posture. "I heard you and Theo are getting married," she said, voice dripping with an edge that made Bree's teeth grit. "I negotiated a chance to see my family one last time, and wish you both luck." "Thank you," Bree replied carefully, forcing politeness where anger simmered just beneath the surface. "I'm sure Theo will appreciate it as well. I'm pretty sure you can see yourself out." Louise shook her head slowly, her smirk widening. "Actually, I can't." Bree's pulse quickened. Her patience was already stretched thin. "Why is that? Please, enlighten me on what you need to do here to make my life even more of a hell." "I'm positive Theo would like to know," Louise said softly, almost venomously, "that I'm carrying his child." Time seemed to stop. The words hung in the air, a sharp, cold blade slicing through the tentative peace Bree had felt. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, a mix of anger, confusion, and something else she didn't have words for. Her hands tightened into fists at her sides. Before the moment could escalate further, James stepped forward. His presence was grounding, a shield around her, and the tension in Bree's shoulders began to ease slightly. Theo, unaware of this moment from his training or travels, would hear about this soon enough, but right now she wasn't alone. She had her family. Bree took a steadying breath and turned her attention back to the grave in her mind, to the father who had taught her strength, and to the brother who had stepped up without question. The forest outside was alive with the wind and rustling leaves, a reminder that life moved forward, no matter the darkness that tried to pull her under. And as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in colors both fierce and gentle, Bree felt, for the first time in a long while, the tentative stirrings of hope. The shadows of the past were still there, but she wasn't facing them alone. Not now. Not ever. Chapter 25. The bathroom door rattled softly as Bree's fingers gripped the edge of the counter. Her body shook from the combination of grief, anger, and the remnants of exhaustion from the emotional storm she had endured over the past 3 hours. Theo's mind link pulsed in her thoughts, a gentle insistence that had evolved into a quiet, unrelenting plea. "Bree, please come out so we can talk." The words echoed in her skull, carrying both hope and frustration, both love and the maddening tether of her mate's concern. For the first hour, she had cried until her cheeks burned and her eyes felt raw. The second hour had been spent pacing the small bathroom, screaming into the sterile walls, pounding her fists into the counters, railing against the betrayal that had consumed her life for the last year. Now, in the third hour, numbness had taken over. Her body felt like lead, her thoughts fogged and distant. "Go away, Theo," she muttered, her voice hollow. There was no energy left for arguing, no energy left to hope. She simply wanted to be left alone. But the pull of his voice, soft yet urgent, persisted. "Please, Bree." Her knees gave way as she sank onto the cold tile floor, and she closed her eyes, letting herself breathe in the tension, the sorrow, the anger, and the longing that had built like a storm cloud inside her. Slowly, with a trembling hand, she rose and opened the bathroom door, half expecting to see a stranger, a cheater, a liar. There he was. Theo stood in the doorway, arms at his sides, expression guarded, but full of that familiar warmth she hated herself for still craving. She couldn't bear to look at him directly. Not yet. Not after everything. To her, he was the embodiment of every betrayal, every lie that had haunted her during her year of captivity. As she pushed past him, instinctively trying to escape into the sanctuary of her room, his hand closed around her arm. Gentle, firm, not harsh, not commanding. It was Theo, the man who had always handled her with care, the man who never once forced her, never once demanded anything she wasn't ready to give. "Bree, let me talk," he said softly, his voice layered with urgency and unspoken pain. Her heart thudded with a conflicted rhythm. She grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and began throwing clothes into it, each piece of fabric a small attempt at reclaiming control. "Don't go," he murmured, a soft echo that wrapped around her ears. "Bree, we need to talk." Talk. That one word ignited the anger coiling inside her like a living thing. "There is nothing to talk about, Theo. You slept with another woman and got her pregnant, while I was strung up, tortured, trapped in hell for information on your cheating ass." Her hands pressed against his chest, shoving, trying to keep the space between them sacred and unbreached. Her voice cracked under the weight of months of trauma, of rage, of unshed tears. "I defended you. I went through hell while you drank yourself numb. While I had wolfsbane coursing through my veins, you were out there living, breathing, pretending life didn't touch you." She yanked the ring from her finger and flung it across the room. It hit the wall with a sharp clatter. Her chest heaved as she stared at him, fury burning hotter than the sun. "Bree, please, it isn't what it looks like," he pleaded, stepping closer, but she recoiled. The audacity of him, trying to negotiate with her in this moment, was almost too much to bear. "No! I am done with this!" she shouted. "I thought I forgave you, but I didn't. If you really loved me, like you said you did, I wouldn't be standing here calling you out for getting another girl pregnant. You should have found me sooner, Theo. You left me to survive hell alone." Her wolf, Evie, stirred inside her, a flicker of anger and pride, transforming into a low growl that vibrated in her chest. For a moment, she felt the power of the wolf that had kept her alive, the survivor who had endured the darkest of nights. Theo's hand clamped over her mouth before she could finish the words that would have formally rejected him. She struggled against him, flailing, tasting the bitter sting of frustration and betrayal. "Bree, don't. You aren't thinking straight," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. The irony wasn't lost on her. Out of the two of them, she was probably thinking the straightest. But still, she gave up the fight, exhaustion sapping the fire from her limbs. He released her, stepping back slightly. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't reject you, Theo," she spat, her voice trembling. "We both know that if I had done to you what you did to me, you'd reject me without a second thought. Do you think being an alpha entitles you to a mate plus a side chick?" "Bree," he whispered, voice softening as he stepped closer again, wrapping his arms around her waist. The warmth of his body, the protective magnetic pull, made her knees threaten to buckle. "Remember that day when I attacked Adam for saying he wanted to marry you? Remember how you calmed me down?" His velvet tones licked around her mind, soothing, coaxing. "You need to calm down now." She felt his lips brush her neck, right where he had marked her before, the mark of a bond that refused to be broken. Anger twisted inside her but softened, melting as she realized the mark was more than a claim. It was a promise. It wasn't hard to find out she was lying, she admitted, the words heavy but steady. He kissed behind her ear, his touch melting the last vestiges of her resistance. Her body surrendered, trembling beneath his hands. "She won't bother us again," he murmured, voice thick with certainty. "I promise this time." A soft moan escaped her as he pressed his lips to the same spot, sending shivers down her spine. "You owe me big time, you know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Of course. I will make sure to pay you back in full, Breanna, he replied with a deep chuckle, the vibrations rolling through her chest, coaxing a small laugh from her lips. He leaned in, capturing her lips in a soft, lingering kiss as he slid the ring back onto her finger. Doubt flickered in her mind, threatening to rise. How can you be sure it's not your kid, though? She asked, breaking the kiss. I know because she isn't even pregnant, Theo reassured her. You'd be able to smell it on her by now. Slowly, he guided her back into the kiss, all tension fading, leaving only warmth and a fragile peace. Now, please come down. I made dinner, he said gently, taking her hand and guiding her from the sanctuary of the bathroom. In the kitchen, the sight that greeted her was nothing short of spectacular. A feast stretched across the counters, steaming vegetables, perfectly roasted meats, fresh bread, and desserts that made her stomach clench with delight. Think this is a little overkill, Theo? She asked, raising an eyebrow, a small smile breaking through the storm inside her. His crooked smile flashed in response. What can I say? I'm a stress cooker, he replied, voice rich with humor. The simple, domestic scene, a sharp contrast to the chaos of emotions that had roared through the bathroom, was grounding, comforting. Bree let herself breathe, letting the tension slide off her shoulders. The anger, the rage, the betrayal. It hadn't vanished, but for the first time in months, it felt like it could exist alongside hope. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself to sit at the table, letting Theo take care of her, letting herself feel safe, letting herself start to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could navigate the mess of the past together. Chapter 26. You can do this, Bree muttered under her breath, her fingers tracing the delicate embroidery along the bodice of the white dress. The dress itself seemed to shimmer under the soft light, the jeweled belt catching every flicker of sun that filtered in through the window. Its simplicity was deceptive. Elegance clung to every seam, every pleat, every delicate stitch. The tank top-style straps draped perfectly over her shoulders, revealing the subtle strength in her arms. She could do this. She had to. Her pack was counting on her. The silence of the house pressed against her like a living thing. Louise hadn't been seen since that fateful day when she nearly tore Theo and Bree apart, and yet Bree's instincts screamed at her to be vigilant. 2 weeks had passed, and the absence of chaos was deafening. Her senses strained, eyes darting to every shadow, every corner of the room, expecting the familiar smirk of the brunette who had caused her so much pain. Bree closed her eyes and ran the steps of the ceremony through her mind. She couldn't practice physically. Her hair, carefully styled by Breanna, would be ruined, but she could run through the motions mentally. Her hair was pinned half up with a jeweled clip, the soft curls spilling in perfect waves down her back. On the rare occasions she wore it down, it had been a comfort, but now the weight of preparation pressed on her. Breanna entered, the familiar scent of cinnamon and perfume preceding her, and smiled warmly. Ready to put it on? The redhead, 5'4", James's mate, had become a whirlwind of energy and humor in Bree's life over the past 2 weeks. Brea's laugh was infectious, her stories animated with a passion that made Bree smile despite the storm of nerves inside her. She could see a writer in the way Bree painted pictures with her words, her hands flying in arcs that punctuated every sentence. As Bree helped her slide into the dress, fastening the delicate buttons along her back and adjusting the belt, Bree felt the weight of the day settle on her shoulders. Bree lifted a diamond necklace, one that had belonged to Bree's mother, and gently placed it around her neck. The sparkle caught in her chest, a bittersweet reminder of all she had lost, all she had survived. Are you ready? Bree asked softly, her voice a tether pulling Bree back from the edge of panic. Was anyone ever truly ready to get married? She nodded, though the truth was she didn't know. Theo and Bree had clashed over the wedding plans, hasty compromises traded for the sake of their love. Just last week, they had argued until 2 a.m. over trivialities, harsh words flying, tempers flaring so much that Bree had feared she might be pregnant, the wolves' sensitivity to hormonal shifts making such fears plausible. The good news was that she wasn't. 5 tests and a visit to the pack doctor confirmed it. Still, the hour before the ceremony brought doubt, gnawing and sharp. Was Louise biding her time, waiting for a moment to strike? Would today, the day meant to be the happiest of her life, be ruined? Breathing in 8 counts, she forced herself to focus. Yesterday had been spent dancing endlessly, perfecting the steps for the father-daughter dance and the first dance with Theo. Her feet ached, heels cutting into her skin, but the exhaustion was grounding. James had kissed Breanna before stepping to her side, taking her hand. "It's time," he said, and the words felt heavy with promise. This was it. The outdoor setting was breathtaking. Warm sunlight dappled through the trees, casting shifting patterns on the wooden benches where their guests sat. Logs and stones formed natural seating, and the stone path, dotted with roses, led her directly to Theo. He stood at the end, sharp in a black tuxedo, a single rose pinned to his jacket. The path was clear, but every step felt monumental, the culmination of everything they had endured. James held her steady until she reached the altar, his support a quiet strength that allowed her to breathe, to feel grounded. There was no turning back. The minister's voice cut through the gentle rustling of leaves. "We gather today to complete a bond forged by the moon goddess before these two were born, alongside a human tradition." The ceremony, standard for their kind, began with the acknowledgement of the mate bond, a sacred acknowledgement of destiny and devotion. Bree's eyes locked onto Theo's as he spoke his vows. "Bree, the moment I saw you dancing, my heart was yours. Ever since then, I have tried to live up to what you deserve in a mate. I haven't always done the best at it. Heck, we know I've probably done a crap job." Laughter rippled through the guests. "I cannot say how blessed I am to have you as my Luna. Every day I will try to be what you deserve, and each day I will try harder until the cold hands of death separate us from each other." As he slid the ring onto her finger, Bree's mind froze for a brief second in awe. How could she possibly top that? Her vows would pale in comparison. "I'm not very good at this," she whispered, soft yet somehow audible to all present. "I've never been the pretty one, the smart one, or even the one who everyone liked. That is, until I met you. Before that day in the woods, I wouldn't have been caught dead talking to a guy in public. Ballet was the only thing that kept me going, my dance partner and my best friend." She stole a glance at Adam, seated with his pregnant mate, and received a small, supportive smile. Turning back to Theo, she continued, voice steadier now. "Now I have a dance partner for life and a lover. One who accepts me for spending 12 hours by myself dancing some days. One I love." Theo's half-crooked smile, gentle and approving, reassured her. The minister stepped forward, signaling the moment. "Alpha, you may kiss your Luna." Theo's hand cupped her cheek, lips brushing hers in a tender, public kiss, a declaration of love and ownership, of devotion. The applause that followed was warm and celebratory, until a slow clap pierced the moment. Bree's stomach dropped. Theo tensed, his protective instincts flaring instantly. From the shadows, Eric Morgan stepped forward, voice dripping with malice. "Such a lovely ceremony. Honestly, I don't think I've seen a cuter one." "Leave now. We have no interest in harming you," Theo commanded, his tone steel, a barrier against the sudden threat. "How did you even find us?" Theo demanded. A little brunette emerged from the shadows, smirking, waving casually. "Louise." The smirk, the presence, the defiance, it all collided with Bree's panic. "A little wolf told me," Louise said, her voice teasing. "We found her about 2 weeks ago. Promised I would spare her life if she gave me information." 15 hunters stepped from the darkness, surrounding Theo, weapons glinting ominously. Eric raised his gun, firing without hesitation. Louise's body crumpled to the ground, a dark puddle spreading beneath her. "Too bad I never intended to keep that promise. She was very entertaining," Eric sneered, spinning the gun to point at Theo. The forest fell silent, every guest frozen, hearts pounding, breaths caught in throats. Bree felt the familiar surge of power within her, the wolf in her rising. Evie's presence was fierce, protective, ready to defend her mate at any cost. The scent of gunpowder, of blood, of danger filled her nostrils. She shifted slightly, muscles coiling, instincts screaming at her to act, to protect, to survive. Theo stood firm, hand outstretched, his eyes burning with a controlled fury. The moment held, taut with threat and tension, a single heartbeat away from chaos. Bree realized then that she was no longer the girl who had trembled in shadows, who had cowered in fear for a year. Today, she was Luna. Today, she was Theo's mate. Today, she would not be broken. Chapter 27. Everyone was staring at her. Frozen faces, wide eyes, and mouths half open, as though time itself had splintered into silence. Bree could feel the weight of their gaze pressing into her, confusion clawing at the edges of her consciousness. What happened? The question burned through her mind. Why are they all staring at me like that? The world felt muffled, distant, as though someone had pressed a pillow against her ears. Slowly she turned, and her eyes locked with Theo's. His expression, a mixture of horror and disbelief, stopped her heart cold. When had she moved in front of him? A strange warmth spread across her stomach. It wasn't comforting. It was thick, heavy, liquid warmth that moved quickly, spreading beneath the fabric of her dress. The sensation came with a faint metallic tang in the air, and when she lifted her trembling hand to her face, the smell hit her. Blood. Her hand was slick, covered in red. She looked down. The pristine white of her dress bloomed into crimson, a horrifying, expanding flower of blood. "Theo?" she whispered, her voice breaking as dizziness flooded her body. The ground swayed. Her knees buckled. "No!" Theo's roar shattered the silence as he lunged forward, barely catching her before she hit the ground. His arms wrapped around her, strong and desperate, but her body barely registered the pressure. The warmth of his embrace was fading into a strange, cold detachment. Shock ebbed away, replaced by raw, searing pain, focused in one small area of her abdomen, like every nerve was being flayed open. She gasped, trembling violently. James was at Theo's side within seconds. "Keep pressure on it," he barked. His voice was steady, but his eyes screamed fear. Theo obeyed for a heartbeat before James pushed his hands away and replaced them with his own. Blood soaked through James's fingers, hot and thick. The metallic scent filled the air. Then the chaos erupted. A hunter stood too close, close enough to be seen, close enough to die. James didn't hesitate. With a guttural growl, he lunged and ripped the man's head clean off, fury written into every motion. That single act was a signal, a spark that set the forest ablaze with violence. All hell broke loose. Wolves shifted mid-motion, bones snapping, fur tearing through skin, snarls filling the air. The pack exploded into motion, meeting the hunters head-on. Gunfire cracked through the trees. Bodies fell, some human, some not, painting the wedding grounds in crimson and chaos. Theo stood, his hands trembling as he laid Bree gently on the ground. His face twisted into something feral, his eyes glowing gold. "Nobody touch Eric." His voice was deep, guttural, almost inhuman. "He's mine." Eric Morgan smiled, his grin dark and cruel. But when Theo advanced, the arrogance slipped from his face. He tried to mask the fear with words. "It's too bad she got in the way," he said, his tone oily, venomous. "I rather liked her. She was feisty during our time together. Didn't want to give you up, even while you slept with another woman." Theo's roar was thunder. Eric's taunt barely left his lips before Theo's fist collided with his jaw. The impact echoed. Eric stumbled back, only to be met with a brutal kick to the chest that sent him crashing into a tree. Bree's vision flickered. Her world swam in and out of focus, colors dulling to red and black. Was Theo bleeding? She wondered dimly. James pressed harder against her wound. "Come on, Bree. I will kill you if you die on me." How did that even make sense? She wanted to laugh. Theo's fury was unrestrained now. He grabbed Eric by the throat, lifting him clean off the ground. The hunter clawed and kicked, but Theo slammed his head back against the tree trunk once, twice, until the bark splintered and blood smeared the wood. Bree couldn't look away. Her brother's hands were soaked in her blood. Her dress, once white, was now scarlet. The aisle where she'd walked moments ago looked like a battlefield. The roses were trampled, the grass was red. Her head spun. Black dots clouded her vision, dancing at the edges. "I can't let them win," she thought desperately. "Theo, can you forgive me if I die?" She didn't want to die. Not now. Not yet. She had fought too hard to come this far. She had more to live for: Theo, James, the pack. The dances she still wanted to perform, the life she hadn't yet lived. Blood bubbled up from her lips as she coughed. Around her, chaos reigned. Wolves screamed, hunters fell, bones cracked. The pack doctor, their last hope, lay lifeless near the benches, his white coat soaked in blood. Fear crept through her chest, cold and relentless. Not fear of death. No, she had met death before. What terrified her was the thought of Theo dying here, of him falling and never waking up. Her strength drained. The world tilted. She barely saw Eric knee Theo in the stomach, sending him stumbling. But Theo didn't fall. His hands shot up, gripping both sides of Eric's head. "I'm done," Theo growled, voice dark and final. "I'm done with your hunters going after my pack." And with that, he twisted. The crack of bone was deafening. Eric's body fell limp, head rolling away into the grass. The air went still for a fraction of a second. Then, all around, a terrible symphony began. The snapping of necks, the cries of wolves, the final death rattle of the last hunter. Bree could barely breathe. Her body screamed for rest. Just a minute, she thought hazily. Just 1 minute of sleep. Her eyes closed. "Breanna!" Theo's voice ripped through the air, raw and terrified. "Don't you dare fall asleep on me!" He fell to his knees beside her. "James, call an ambulance." "I already did," James shouted, panic in his tone. "They're stuck 15 minutes out. There's an accident blocking the road." Theo's fist slammed into the ground. "Damn it, James! She doesn't have 15 minutes!" Without hesitation, he scooped Bree into his arms, blood soaking into his tuxedo. "I'm taking her myself." And then he ran. Branches whipped past them as Theo tore through the forest, faster than Bree had ever seen him move. The wind screamed in her ears. Her vision dimmed again and again. "Theo," she wheezed, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. He couldn't hear her, or refused to listen, focused entirely on running. "Theo," she tried again, reaching weakly to touch his face. He glanced down, eyes filled with terror and determination. "Don't think like that. You're going to be fine." Was I, though? "Please, Theo," she whispered, trembling. "I'm tired, and running through the woods isn't helping." He ran faster. Her breathing hitched. The cold seeped deeper into her bones. "Theo, I'm cold." He slowed abruptly and set her down, his chest heaving. Quickly, he stripped off his blood-soaked jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Bree, you're so pale," he said, his voice breaking. "That's what happens when you lose blood," she murmured weakly, forcing a small laugh. He gave a strangled chuckle in return, the sound of a man trying to keep from falling apart. Then, without warning, he lifted her again and kept running. Theo. Her eyes fluttered as numbness spread through her limbs. He didn't stop. Tears glistened in his eyes, cutting through the dirt and blood on his face. Bree reached up, wiping them away with a trembling hand. Each nerve in her body was fading, every beat of her heart weaker than the last. Far ahead, lights glowed faintly, a hospital shimmering like salvation. I can't fly, she whispered, a dazed smile ghosting across her lips. I'm a flightless bird. Theo slowed again, shaking his head fiercely. Bree, don't start talking like that. Look, we're almost there. You see it? Up ahead? His voice cracked. Don't give up on me now. It's true, though, she said softly. I can't feel anything. He shook his head, refusing to hear it. You will fly again, he whispered. In a year or so, we'll have our pups. A little boy first. We'll name him Jonathan, after your father. And maybe a little girl later. We'll name her Prim, like in the Hunger Games. You loved her, remember? Her lips twitched into a smile. And every Sunday, we'll go down to the beach you took me to after the accident. He nodded, tears spilling freely now. Exactly. She could see it, the vision shimmering before her eyes. A little boy, about 7, with Theo's dark hair, but her eyes, running through the shallows of the beach. Behind him, a little girl, 5 years old, golden-haired, her eyes like Theo's, chasing him with laughter. And she and Theo, sitting in the sand, his arms around her as they watched them play. You'll teach Prim how to dance, Theo said softly, his voice trembling. You'll teach her to move like the swan you are. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he stroked her face. I'll make sure you fly again, my flightless bird. His voice broke entirely. I love you. I love you so much. Please, don't let death dampen your wings. Don't let him ground you. Please, Bree, fly again. She smiled faintly, the corners of her lips curling as her eyes began to drift shut. The cold settled in her chest. The pain faded, replaced by weightlessness. Theo's sobs broke through the night. I love you, my little bird, he whispered. No matter if you're flightless, I love you. A single tear fell from his cheek and landed on hers. And then there was nothing. No sound, no light, no pain, just silence. And 3 final words echoing in the void as she slipped away. I love you. Chapter 28. Theo's eyes scanned the battlefield, every nerve alert, every muscle taut. The forest around him was alive with chaos, the scent of gunpowder mixed with the copper tang of blood. Branches whipped past as wolves shifted mid-stride, fangs bared and eyes glowing gold. Hunters from the north had taken advantage of a moment of vulnerability. They had attacked because, months ago, his pack had eliminated a few of their spies, and they still bore grudges. Jonathan, his eldest, had narrowly survived one of the hunters' earlier ambushes. He had turned 15 just a few months ago, but already the alpha blood in him was undeniable. Strength, cunning, and the raw instincts of leadership, Jonathan had inherited all of it. Theo's chest tightened with a mix of pride and fear. Every step he took, every clash of claws and bullets, was a reminder that his family's survival depended on him. We need to help the Alpha, one of his warriors shouted, their voice cutting through the cacophony of war. Our instructions were clear. Send them away, Theo's beta yelled back. Orders had to be followed, but instinct screamed at him to move, to protect. Pain seared through his side. A hunter's bullet had found its mark, knocking him to the ground. He gritted his teeth, feeling the heat of blood spilling across his body. As he laid there, dazed and struggling for breath, his eyes caught the glint of his wedding ring in the sunlight filtering through the treetops. 16 years. 16 long, cruel years. He had never taken it off. Well, almost never. The rare moments, a shower, a day spent baking with Prim, had been tiny concessions, small breaths of normalcy in a life otherwise ruled by grief and duty. Prim. His little Prim. She was 13 now. He could still see her tiny hands clutching Bree's point shoes the day she had discovered them, a treasure from her mother. The memory always made him smile, how her eyes lit up with determination, how she demanded to be enrolled in dance classes. Most days, after finishing her homework, she disappeared into the big studio where he had once danced with Bree, her feet moving gracefully across the polished floor. In just a few short years, she would be as talented as her mother. But now, pain weighed down every fiber of his being. Limbs that had once carried him over battlefields with the speed of a tempest felt like lead. Every nerve in his body pulsed with agony. His vision blurred as light seemed to stretch and sharpen simultaneously. And then, he felt it. The softest pair of hands grasped his, and warmth spread through him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. All the pain, all the fatigue, all the weight of 16 long years fell away in a heartbeat. The battlefield, the chaos, the hunters, all of it vanished. All around him was white, pure, endless. And there she was. Her hair, golden and perfectly styled, was pulled into a tight bun. Her smile, radiant, impossibly perfect, illuminated the space around her. His eyes were drawn to the glint of the ring on her finger, the symbol of a promise that had survived death itself. She reached up and caressed his cheek, and in that touch, the years collapsed. "You have aged far too many years, dear," she said softly, her voice like music, a balm on wounds he didn't even know had festered. "And you haven't aged one, my flightless bird. My Breanna." She wasn't wearing the dress she had died in 16 years ago. No, she was dressed for dance. A black leotard hugged her form, a pink tutu floated delicately around her waist, white tights stretched over her legs, and her point shoes gleamed as though she had never left the stage. It had taken him a year to find the courage to adopt. Jonathan had been orphaned, left alone when his alpha line was wiped out. 2 years later, Prim had come into his life, and every moment since had been dedicated to raising them, to keeping Bree's memory alive. He had never remarried. He couldn't. She was irreplaceable. James had ensured the children were safe, nurtured, and loved, but only Theo had been able to continue the legacy Bree had started. Now, standing before him, alive in the purity of his memories, he pulled her close. For the first time in 16 years, he kissed her. The weight, the despair, the endless nights of grief, all of it melted in the warmth of her embrace. He had almost seen her during the first year after her death, a cruel trick of fate that only deepened his depression. The memory of James talking him down, of reminding him that Bree would never want him to give up, that was now validated in the strength of the life they had built and the family they raised. She pulled away slightly, and he took her right hand in his left, placing his right hand firmly on her hip. In his mind, music began to play. And dance. Oh, how she danced. They moved together, effortlessly, as though no years had passed. He led her through simple steps, the ease of two bodies long synchronized in rhythm. Then he spun her out, watching as she executed a chain of chaîné turns, her form precise, elegant, unbroken by time. He caught her just before she landed in 5th position, lifting her with strength and precision before dipping her into a dramatic pose, facing the ground, one leg in passe. Slowly, he guided her back to standing, grounding her in the motion of life itself. Her back faced him now. He wrapped his arm around her, took her hand in his, and led her in a series of fluid steps. Her eyes closed, a soft expression of trust and love as they danced together again. The memory of her flightlessness, the promise he had whispered before she died, she would fly again, was fulfilled in every step, every spin, every moment they shared. They danced, unbroken, as the moon goddess's light bathed them in ethereal glow. Time itself seemed to bend, allowing the reunion of two souls separated by cruel fate. Together, they moved as one, twirling and dipping, spinning and leaping. Theo's heart pounded not with fear or sorrow, but with joy and awe. He was finally home. The battlefield, the years of grief, the moments of despair, all dissolved. There was only Breanna, the children, and the endless, luminous promise of their love. And together they danced, into eternity, into the waiting embrace of the moon goddess. The end. Thank you all so much for watching this series from beginning to end. This story meant a lot to me, and I truly hope you felt every emotion, every twist, and every moment of growth along the way. Your support, comments, and time mean more than you know. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, and feel free to check out my other series waiting for you on the channel. Thank you for being here, and for being part of this story.